My Wild West show, which toured the U.S. and Europe for 3 decades, included scenes about and use of cavalry troops mounted on horseback. I had years of experience with cavalry. My experience began as a cavalryman in the Union Army during the war between the states. The American Civil War started in 1861 when I was 16. I promised my mother I would not enlist while she was alive. It was hard for me. I blamed those favoring slavery for the death of my father. You see, we lived in the territory of Kansas when it was proposed to make Kansas a state. The toughest issue, which led to violence, resulting in my father being stabbed, was on the question of whether Kansas would be a free or slave state. In a bizarre situation, my father was asked to speak in public on the issue, said he opposed slavery for Kansas, and was stabbed by a man who supported slavery. He lived on, but because his lung was injured, he died 2 years later. I blame Missourians for the violence. Missouri became part of the Confederacy. I wanted revenge, and besides, by the time the war arrived, the prospect of combat already appealed to me. Even though I did not enlist, I became a Kansas belligerent in a group called Jayhawkers, and then another called Redlegs. Both conducted raids into Missouri. We stole horses and intimidated Missourians. There were shootings and pursuits. Then, in November of 1863, Mother took ill. I returned home and stayed with her until she died. By February 1864, I enlisted in the Union Army, but under rather strange circumstances. For 2 months after Mother died, I lived a dissolute life consorting with very bad actors, drinking, and in malbehavior until I encountered Union soldiers on furlough for rest and recreation from the war. After a night of very hard drinking, I woke up the next morning to find out I had enlisted in the Union Army with papers and my signature to prove it. What could I do? I was now a private in the Union Army, assigned to the 7th Regiment of the Kansas Cavalry on the way to St. Louis and then Memphis. Company H. For the next 19 months, I would be a cavalryman in the Union Army. How active was the 7th in the war? Organized on the 28th day of October 1861 at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, the regiment served a term of 3 years and 11 months until its final muster out of service. The aggregate distance marched, as shown by the records of the regiment, exclusive of the distance traveled on transports and by rail, is 12,050 miles. It was often engaged against rebel forces during the regiment's existence. I was fortunate because by 1864, the Union Cavalry found parity in combat with the Confederates. Plus, we had better equipment, better horses, better weapons, and we were paid for our services. In addition, attrition had taken its toll on the Confederate cavalry in both horses and men. Nonetheless, my regiment had to fight against formidable Confederate leaders who were trying to stop Sherman's march to the sea and to burn Atlanta by destroying the only rail line supporting Sherman's forces. There is one special adventure I would like to share with you. This exploit became legendary. It involved Confederate General Forrest, the South's most audacious general, who confounded Union forces with his raids by too often getting to the field with the most mounted horsemen, and who, by the way, became the Grand Wizard of the KKK after the war, something he vigorously denied. Forrest was also a good businessman before the war, but he failed afterwards. My adventure began when I captured a Confederate who I knew before the war. His name was Golden. He was carrying intelligence information meant for delivery to the Confederate command under Forrest. I took his intelligence information, which was of little value anyway, crossed the lines by dressing as a Confederate, and unabashedly proceeded to General Forrest's camp, entered his tent, told him that as Golden was being captured, he handed over his papers to me and asked me to deliver them to General Forrest. I turned over the papers and offered my services as a spy. I had weaved a good story, passing well as a Southerner, and as I expected, my offer was accepted. I spent 2 days in camp collecting intelligence and making sketches when I noticed Golden was talking to General Forrest. Somehow, Golden had managed to escape. I knew that my gig was up, my goose cooked. Instinctively, but calmly, I walked to my horse and cleared out, hightailing it back to the Union lines and delivering the intelligence I had collected. In my ploy and escapade, I guess I was not only successful in being a spy, but also a convincing actor, playing myself and telling a good story. It's a story I and others told over and over that naturally grew legendary. Of course, it also helped build my confidence, as well as my ego. Ego? What ego? During my time in the Army, I took a lot in. The organization, discipline, the nature of cavalry participating in numerous encounters against the Confederates, the logistics of moving masses of men, equipment, animals long distances. It gave me great ideas about how to feature cavalry in my shows. The lessons learned served me well in my role as leader of the Wild West show, where we moved hundreds of performers, equipment, material, and animals throughout the U.S. and in Europe. I also benefited from the lessons learned from the pomp and circumstance associated with military parades. We made grand entrances into towns and cities, and were beginning our shows. After mustering out of the Union Army, I was ready to move on to becoming a cavalry scout on the plains. Until next time, happy trails.